guys. You are listening to Shepherds and Kings. My name is Jacob Trelaw, and I'm the host and the founder of this podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, thanks for taking the time to listen. And if you've been with us for a little while, we're glad you're back. We've got a great conversation for you today. Our guest is Tom Bis. He's a pastor out in Connecticut, but he is an amputee and a cancer survivor. And we were able to have a great conversation, starting off with his story and a little bit about his book. He wrote a book called When the Touch of God Hurts. And we talk a little bit about what God taught him and what he was able to pass along to anyone who might be going through a trial. But then we also get a chance to talk about parenting and just being a man in general. And it's a great conversation I'm looking forward to you guys hearing. Our guest today is Pastor Tom Bish. He is the pastor of Heritage Baptist Church in Wallingford, Connecticut. He has pastored there since 1998, and today we're talking about his story. He wrote a book called When the Touch of God Hurts, talking about what has gone on in his life and some of the things that he's gone through and what God has taught him in those times. Brother Bish, it's good to have you with us today.
Good to be here today. Thank you.
So your story is pretty incredible. Can you kind of launch us into that and where things began for you? You don't have to start, all the way back from your beginning per se, but just, you're pastoring, you have a young family, and maybe give us a little bit of background on what you went through.
Sure. In 2006, I had gone to the Outer Banks of North Carolina to preach for the weekend. While I was there, I got very, very sick and ended up in the emergency room, diagnosed with pneumonia. It had progressed so rapidly that the little hospital in the island wasn't prepared to take care of me. So they sent me up to Virginia in an ambulance. And within 2 days, I was in intensive care. They were calling the family, telling them that this was it. And in that quick of a time, my life, our entire lives were turned inside out and upside down. And it was a rough couple of weeks. We finally made it home 2.5, 3 weeks after we had gotten there. And while I was recovering from the pneumonia, I woke up one day and I just had this pain in the bottom of my left foot, just like I had stepped on something sharp. And over the course of a week, it got worse till I was finally on crutches. And they kept misdiagnosing it. I'd go to the doctor. They thought that my pneumonia had settled in my bloodstream and had actually settled in the bottom of my left foot. So they treated me for that for 6 months with steroids and painkillers and antibiotics, when the reality was I had cancer. And it just went undetected all of that time. When they finally found the cancer, they did some surgeries and they just couldn't get rid of it. It went onto the cellular level and became life-threatening at that point. So in April of 2007, they amputated my left foot. So I learned how to walk again and figured maybe this was it. We were done with the trial and life was good. And 3 years later, I developed new tumors on the same leg and they had to amputate a little bit more. And from that point on, it seemed like everything was fine. And we spent 10 years in relatively good health. I learned to walk without a limp. I learned to run and compete and so forth. And it was, we thought the trial was over. In January 2017, my wife woke me up early one morning. She hadn't been feeling well, but she wasn't making any sense with what she was saying. So I took her to the emergency room, and she'd been my caregiver for 12 years. And within a couple hours at the hospital, they informed us that she had a brain tumor. It was stage 4 cancer called glioblastoma. And for 11 months in 2017, we did everything we could to combat that. She did surgeries, radiation. We went to Mexico for treatment. But in December of 2017, God chose to take her home. And God was good to us. And she had a very good quality of life all of that time and very little pain, for which we were thankful. but it was just a new trial, and the deepest one yet. And then 8 months after she went to heaven, I developed new tumors on my leg. And in August of 2018, they ended up amputating my entire left leg. And so I'm still living in that world with the loss of my wife, the loss of my leg, still learning a lot, growing, trying to physically bounce back, emotionally, mentally. And my wife had a statement through everything that happened to her. She said, God is always good. And in our church, that became the motto. It's written all over everything. God is always good. And we've tried to live with that theme. And we've tried to make sure that our attitude and everything has always portrayed that no matter what happens, we still believe God is always good. And he has shown himself faithful in incredible ways to us over this time.
Wow. So that phrase, God is always good, did it take you guys a while to get there? I mean, was there some struggle before you got to that point spiritually?
She adopted that phrase when she got sick. It's not the first time that she had used it. When I first got sick, it took us a while to adjust to everything because I couldn't even go to church, let alone pastor a church. And we did not know what the future held. And so we both had to find our moorings and so forth. But within a few weeks, we were adjusting. We were spending hours in prayer, hours in the Bible. And remarkably, we'd been married for quite a while at that point. We were spending more time in the Bible together than we ever had in our married lives. And that's when we just decided, our kids are young, they're watching us, and we don't want to blow it by getting discouraged or getting a bad attitude, getting mad at God just because we're going through a trial. So we just decided we want to be yielded and let God do what he wants to do.
Because it was unique for you and not being able to get around, really, not being able to stand. I know you talked about preaching from a chair. Was there a bit of helplessness in all of this? And even not just from maybe a spiritual standpoint, but just from as a pastor, a leader, or as a man, a father? Can you talk a little bit about that feeling?
Helplessness is a good word. It was actually overwhelming. That first summer, I considered resigning over and over again because I really felt like I was of no value to the people. They were taking care of me instead of me taking care of them. And it was just for a man that was used to going 7 days a week, and all of a sudden everything came to a grinding halt. It was a major struggle. Even at home, my wife had to do so much for me. The only thing I wouldn't allow her to do was mow the lawn. I just couldn't stand that. So we had some men came over and took care of that if my son was away at college, during that time. And I really had to wrestle with that idea of, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I didn't want to resign because I was defeated and, just giving up. Right. I just thought I was cheating the people by trying to pastor the church, but I wasn't there. And I had to work through that. And the men of our church were amazing. As if they read my mind, they just would come to me and say, don't even think about resigning. We're not going to allow it to happen. We're in this together. And that really helped me more than they realized, to just know that it's okay to hang on, and God's got this thing.
Sure. I imagine that's a really good, practical lesson for if we're not currently the one going through suffering, the person that we see or that we know of, just tell them to hang in there and, remind them that God's in control. That
encouragement went a long way.
So you talked a little bit about, you took a trip with your wife, and I don't remember if that was pre or post amputation here, but you talked about you kind of got angry at God for some of the things you were going through. You care to talk about that at all?
That was before the amputation. When we got back from the hospital in Virginia, I spent about a month just recovering from the pneumonia. During that time, I was back in the emergency room twice for pneumonia-related issues. But we thought things were doing better, so my wife planned a getaway for us to Bar Harbor, Maine, just for 3 or 4 days, just to sort of recover and then get ready to move forward. And it was right before that I started having the terrible pain in my left foot. And that pain was so bad that oddly, if I sat down with my foot elevated or I was laying down, the pain was there, but I could tolerate it very well. But the moment I stood up, the pain would take my breath away. It was just an incredible thing. So here we had planned this getaway, and I wanted her to have that because she had endured so much while I was, sick and in the hospital and all of that. And we took the trip, but for me, it was a nightmare because I couldn't do anything. I spent half the time crying in pain and the other half crying because I just felt like she was getting robbed of a much needed getaway. And that was the time that I struggled with just frustration and anger about the whole thing.
Wow. So practically, for someone who's going through something, struggling with something, and you talked about you were more concerned about, your wife and your family. Is there some kind of help that you or advice that you could give? Again, your situation may be a bit extreme compared to what someone might be going through, but some practical advice on trying to lead your family while you're the one dealing with all this, and maybe even just in your own head.
I have a 3-word answer to that question. It's part of a sermon I preached years and years ago here on a Wednesday night. We just, during that day, we had phone call after phone call of families in the church. One lady found out that day she was having cancer. Another lady, her son was working and severely injured at work. And it was like 4 phone calls in a row. So that night I just wrote 3 words on a 3x5 card. And I'm glad God gave them to me because these are what I had to teach myself over and over again. The first word is accept. That we just have to come to a place where we accept our circumstance, where it's going on. It doesn't mean that we're giving in, that we're not, it's not a defeatist thing. It's just, look, I can't change that I don't have a left leg. I can't change that
it's out of my control.
In heaven. Yeah, at some point I have to just to accept this is where I am. This is what God allowed, and I have to stop fighting against it. And that's a big step. The second is the word, the letter B is the word befriend. I have to decide if God allowed it, why did he allow it? What am I supposed to learn? I need to let this draw me close to God. I need to, if you will, find as many reasons as God sees fit to reveal to me and not make this thing my enemy, but realize God meant it for good. And the third word is crown. Paul said in Philippians 1:20 that in his body, whether it be by life or by death, he wanted Christ to be magnified. And he wrote that from prison. And so crown it means, okay, Lord, use this for your glory. Are you going to use this to help somebody else through a trial? Are you preparing me for a different kind of ministry to different people? So accept and befriend and crown, they are really my theme words, and they have been since the first amputation, and really in the last 3 years, they've been my mantra almost, because every day I'm still at the place with my current situation that I have to at some point during the day accept this is who I am, and I'm not going to go back to what I used to be. This is me. And I have to befriend it and not get upset or angry or discouraged or depressed, and have to crown it and find a way for God to use it. And those 3 words keep my spirit right. And we learned if our spirits were right, it helped our kids keep their spirits right.
Sure. Do you think